The first time Luca Moretti walked into the garage, the rain followed him inside. It clung to his black coat, darkened the concrete floor, and made the flickering fluorescent lights hum louder than usual. The place smelled of oil, rust, and burned coffee, ordinary smells, the kind Luca had lived with for most of his life. He wiped his hands on a stained rag and didn't look up right away. Men like the one standing at the entrance didn't come to broken garage on the edge of the city unless something had already gone wrong. "Can I help you?" Luca asked, still bent over the open hood of a rusted sedan. Silence answered him. Heavy silence, the kind that presses on your ears. When Luca finally straightened and turned, he felt an instinctive tightening in his chest. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, his suit too clean for this place. His face was calm, but not gentle. Eyes sharp, measured. A man who was used to being obeyed without raising his voice. "I'm looking for a mechanic," the man said. "You found one," Luca replied. "If you're looking for miracles, try a church." A flicker of something passed through the man's eyes, amusement maybe, or irritation. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. "My name is Vittorio De Luca," he said. "I was told you fix things others won't touch." Luca stiffened. He knew that name. Everyone in the city did. De Luca didn't need an introduction. Power clung to him like a shadow, quiet but absolute. "I fix cars," Luca said carefully. "That's all." Vittorio nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. He gestured toward the street, where a sleek black SUV waited, engine running. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. "It's not a car," Vittorio said. "It's my daughter." The words landed wrong, too soft for a man like him. Luca frowned. "I'm not a doctor." "I know," Vittorio replied. "That's why I'm here." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded photograph, worn at the edges like it had been handled too often. He held it out. Against his better judgment, Luca took it. The photo showed a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, dark hair tied back with a ribbon. Big eyes. She was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her smile careful, like she didn't want to take up too much space in the world. "My daughter, Sofia," Vittorio said. His voice didn't crack. It didn't soften either. "She hasn't walked since she was 4. Luca swallowed. "What happened?" "An accident," Vittorio said. "The doctors say her spine healed, but her body never listened." Luca handed the photo back. "Then you need better doctors." "I've had the best," Vittorio said. "In Rome, in Zurich, in New York. They all say the same thing." His jaw tightened. "They say nothing is wrong anymore. And yet she still can't stand." Luca shook his head. "I don't understand what you think I can do." Vittorio studied him, really looked at him now. At the oil-stained shirt, the cracked hands. The tired eyes of a man who fixed things because broken things made sense. "You grew up with a mother who couldn't walk," Vittorio said quietly. The words hit harder than Luca expected. "How do you?" "You built her braces yourself," Vittorio continued. "You adjusted them every month because you couldn't afford new ones. She walked again, didn't she?" Luca felt something twist inside him. His mother had walked again. Slowly, painfully, but she had walked. "That wasn't medicine," Luca said. "That was patience." Vittorio stepped closer. "Then that's what I'm asking for." Luca laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You're asking the wrong man." "No," Vittorio said. "I'm asking the only one who hasn't already given up on her." The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the metal roof. Luca looked past Vittorio, out at the gray street, at the life he had learned to keep small and quiet. Getting involved with a man like this was dangerous. Saying no was safer, smarter. But the photo burned in his mind. That careful smile. "Don't want your money," Luca said slowly. Vittorio's mouth tightened. "You'll have it anyway. I don't want your protection, or your name attached to mine." "Then what do you want?" Vittorio asked. Luca met his eyes. "I want to see her first." Vittorio didn't answer immediately. For the first time, hesitation showed. Not fear, something closer to vulnerability. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow, he said. At my house. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. If you fail, Vittorio added without looking back, nothing changes. But if you succeed, the sentence hung unfinished between them. The door closed, the rain swallowed the sound. Luca stood alone in the garage, heart pounding, knowing he had just stepped into something that could change his life or destroy it. And somewhere across the city, a little girl named Sofia was waiting. Without knowing why, Punta Vittorio de Luca's house did not look like a home. It rose behind iron gates and stone walls, cold and deliberate, as if it had been designed to keep feelings out as much as people. Luca arrived the next morning with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, his stomach tight. He had turned back twice on the drive, told himself this was a mistake, that men like De Luca didn't invite trouble, they were trouble. The gates opened without a word. Cameras followed him as he parked. A guard nodded once and pointed toward the main entrance. Inside, the air was quiet in a way that felt expensive. No clutter. No warmth. Marble floors reflected the light so cleanly it made Luca conscious of every step. A woman stood near the staircase, her posture straight, her hands clasped together like she was holding herself in place. She was beautiful in a tired way. Dark hair pulled back too tightly. Eyes sharp, but worn around the edges. When she looked at Luca, something flickered there, suspicion, fear, and a fierce protectiveness that didn't bother to hide. "You're the mechanic," she said. "Yes," Luca replied. "And you are Elena," she said. Sofia's mother. Her voice softened when she said her daughter's name, as if that one word belonged to a different life. "I don't know what Vittorio told you," Elena continued, stepping closer, lowering her voice. "But I need you to understand something. My daughter is not a problem to be fixed." Luca nodded immediately. "I know." She studied him, searching his face for something. "Then why are you here?" Luca exhaled. "Because sometimes people stop listening when machines don't make sense. I don't want to fix her. I want to understand her." Elena's jaw tightened. She looked away for a moment, then back toward the hallway. "She's in the garden," she said. "That's where she likes to be." The garden was the only place that felt alive. Green pushed back against stone. Sunlight filtered through tall trees. And in the middle of it all sat Sofia, her wheelchair positioned carefully near a fountain, her fingers trailing through the water. She didn't notice Luca at first. She was humming softly to herself. Luca didn't approach right away. He crouched a few steps away, lowering himself to her level. "Hi," he said gently. Sofia turned. Her eyes widened not in fear, but curiosity. "You're not a doctor," she said immediately. Luca smiled. "Is it that obvious?" "They always smell like soap," she said. "You smell like metal," he laughed before he could stop himself. "That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me." She watched him closely, then shrugged. "Papa says you're here to help." "I'm here to listen first," Luca replied. She tilted her head. "Most people don't do that." They sat in silence for a moment. Luca noticed how carefully Sofia held herself, how every movement seemed measured, like she didn't fully trust her own body. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Mostly it's just quiet, like my legs forgot me." Luca swallowed. That familiar ache rose in his chest. "Would you be angry," he asked, "if I asked you to try something strange?" "Not today, not even soon. Just someday." She considered this. "Will it hurt?" "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'll stop the moment you say so." Sofia looked toward her mother. Elena nodded once, barely noticeable. "Okay," Sofia said, "but only if you promise not to look sad when I fall." Luca felt his throat tighten. "I promise." From the terrace above, Vittorio watched. His face remained unreadable, but his hands were clenched at his sides. Seeing his daughter laugh with a stranger stirred something uncomfortable in him, something close to hope and even closer to fear. That night, after Luca left, Vittorio stood outside Sofia's room longer than usual. He listened to her breathe. He remembered the day she stopped walking, the way the doctor spoke, the way he signed papers and wrote checks as if money could replace time. Elena joined him in the hallway. "You shouldn't give her false hope," she said quietly. Vittorio didn't look at her. Hope is all she has left. And what about you? Elena asked. What do you have left if this fails? For the first time, Vittorio didn't answer, because deep down he already knew the truth. If Luca failed, it wouldn't just break Sofia's heart, it would finally break his. Luca began coming every afternoon, always at the same time, always alone. No entourage, no guards hovering over his shoulder, just a man with worn shoes and a quiet presence, walking through gates that usually swallowed people whole. At first, Vittorio watched from a distance, from balconies, from behind glass. He told himself it was caution, not control. But the truth pressed closer every day. He was afraid of what hope looked like when it entered his house without permission. Luca never touched Sofia in those early days. He sat with her in the garden, sometimes on the grass, sometimes on the stone edge of the fountain. They talked about small things, about birds, about how water sounded different when it hit marble versus stone, about how Sofia used to run and how she still remembered the feeling of wet against her legs, even if she couldn't feel the legs themselves. You remember pain more than comfort, Luca said once, but the body remembers comfort longer than you think. Sofia looked at him skeptically. Are you saying my legs are lying? I'm saying they might be scared, Luca replied. She considered that seriously. Inside the house, Elena watched too. She told herself she was protecting her daughter, but sometimes she caught herself leaning forward slightly when Luca spoke, listening like she hadn't listened to anyone in years. One afternoon, Luca brought a small wooden box with him. He set it beside Sofia's wheelchair and didn't open it right away. What's that? She asked. A question, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I don't like questions. I know, he said. That's why I put it in a box. He opened it slowly. Inside were two simple leather straps, handmade, rough at the edges. They're not braces, Luca said quickly. They're reminders. They don't hold you up. They just tell your body where it is. Sofia's smile faded. Papa says doctors already tried everything. I'm not trying to fix you, Luca said again, softer now. I'm asking your legs to remember something they once knew. Elena stepped forward. And if they don't, then we stop, Luca said without hesitation. And nothing is lost. That was the moment Elena believed him, not because of his words, but because of how easily he was willing to walk away. They tried for the first time 3 days later. Sofia insisted on doing it barefoot. I want to feel the ground, she said. Luca positioned the straps gently, explaining every movement before he made it. He never rushed, never assumed. His hands were steady, but his eyes never left Sofia's face. Tell me the second you feel uncomfortable, he said. I will, she replied, loudly. Elena stood behind Sofia, her hands hovering inches away, ready to catch her. Vittorio stood further back, arms crossed, jaw tight, as if holding himself together by force alone. Okay, Luca said. We don't stand yet, we just lean. Sofia nodded. She leaned forward. Her body trembled immediately, like a newborn deer testing its legs. Luca's hand hovered near her knee but didn't touch. Breathe, he said. You're safe. Sofia's face tightened. I don't like this. I know, Luca replied, but you're doing it. After 5 seconds, she sat back down hard, breath shaky, eyes bright with unshed tears. I failed, she whispered. Luca shook his head. You leaned. That's not failing. Vittorio turned away. That night, he poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. He sat in his study, staring at the wall, replaying the image of his daughter, shaking, fighting gravity, like it was an enemy she had forgotten how to face. Elena found him there. She didn't cry, Vittorio said quietly. No, Elena replied. She didn't. He looked at his hands, hands that had ordered violence, hands that had signed death warrants, hands that had never once been able to carry his daughter across a room without fear. I bought hospitals, he said. I bought specialists. I bought silence. And this man walks in with leather straps and patience. Elena didn't answer. The next week, progress came in inches. Sofia learned how to shift her weight, how to trust the ground again, how to stop apologizing every time her body shook. But something else changed too. Sofia laughed more. She teased Luca. She waited for him at the garden gate. And Luca Luca stayed longer. Sometimes he and Elena talked after Sofia was taken inside to rest. About nothing important at first. About food. About the city. About how quiet the house felt at night. "You didn't ask for money," Elena said one evening. "I know what money costs," Luca replied. She studied him. "And what does this cost you?" Luca looked toward the window, where Sofia's silhouette moved behind the curtains. "More than I planned," he said. From the shadows, Vittorio watched them talk. Watched the way Elena's shoulders relaxed around Luca. Watched the way Luca listened to her like she mattered. Something ugly and unfamiliar twisted in his chest. It wasn't anger, it was fear. Because for the first time since Sofia's accident, Vittorio realized he wasn't the most important man in his own house anymore. The first time Sofia stood. It happened by accident. It was late afternoon, the kind where sunlight turns soft and gold like the day is trying to apologize before leaving. Luca had already told her they were done for the day. She'd done well, leaned longer, steadied her breathing, laughed when her legs shook instead of flinching away from them. "I want to try one more time," she said, stubborn in the way only children can be. Luca hesitated. He looked at Elena. Elena looked at Sofia, and in that silent exchange lived years of fear and hope tangled together. "One more," Elena said finally. "But we stop if you feel tired." Sofia nodded. They positioned the chair. Luca knelt in front of her, his hands light, careful, as if touching glass. Elena stood behind, her arms ready, her breath shallow. "Remember," Luca said, voice steady, "we're not standing. We're just asking the ground if it remembers you." Sofia smiled faintly. "That's a strange way to ask," he smiled back. "Most important questions are." She leaned forward. Her legs trembled immediately. The familiar panic flashed across her face, and Luca raised his hand slightly, not touching, just present. "Slow," he murmured. "You're not falling." And then without meaning to, she straightened. It was barely a second, maybe less. A breath, a pause in the world. But she was upright. Elena gasped. Sofia froze, eyes wide, body locked in place like she didn't trust what was happening. I'm... Her voice cracked. "Standing," Luca said softly. "You're standing." The moment shattered. Her knees buckled, and she dropped back into the chair, laughing and crying at the same time, her hands covering her mouth like she was afraid the sound might break something. Elena collapsed to her knees, pulling Sofia into her arms. From the terrace, Vittorio watched it all. He didn't move. He couldn't. His heart slammed against his ribs, like it was trying to escape his body. For a brief, terrifying second, he thought he might cry, and the thought scared him more than anything else. That night, Sofia refused to sleep. She kept asking Elena to tell the story again. How she stood, how long, whether Papa saw. "He saw," Elena said gently. "He didn't blink." In the dark hallway, Vittorio stood outside her door, his hand hovering near the handle, listening to her small, excited breaths. He thought of all the moments he'd missed. All the times he'd chosen meetings over bedtime. Power over presence. The next morning, he did something he hadn't done in years. He canceled everything. Luca arrived that afternoon to find Vittorio already in the garden, not watching from afar. Standing close. Too close, maybe. "Good afternoon," Luca said carefully. Vittorio nodded. "I want to understand what you're doing." Luca met his gaze. "Then you'll need to stop trying to control it." Silence stretched between them. "I don't control my daughter," Vittorio said. Luca didn't look away. "You control everything around her?" Vittorio's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "Sit," Luca said, nodding toward the stone bench. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Vittorio did. That afternoon, Sofia stood again, longer this time, 2 seconds, 3, her hands clenched in Luca's sleeves, her breath shaky but determined. Vittorio leaned forward unconsciously. "Papa," Sofia said suddenly, her voice trembling. "Come here." Vittorio froze. Elena's heart pounded. She looked at him, really looked at him, searching for the man she used to love beneath the armor. Slowly, Vittorio stepped forward. Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "Don't be scared." The words cut deeper than any blade. Vittorio reached out, his hands hovering awkwardly, unsure where to go. "You're doing great," he said, his voice low, uneven. She stood for him. That night, Vittorio poured out the drink he'd been saving for years. He sat alone in his study and stared at a photo of Sofia as a toddler, running barefoot across marble floors he now hated. Something was changing in his house, and he wasn't sure whether to fight it or let it break him open, because as much as Sofia was learning to trust her legs again, Vittorio was learning how little he trusted himself. The first step didn't happen in the garden. It happened in the hallway outside Sofia's room, late one evening, when no one was watching closely enough to stop her. Luca had already left. Elena was folding laundry in the adjoining room. Vittorio was on the phone, his voice low, controlled, discussing matters that once felt urgent and now felt hollow. Sofia sat on the edge of her bed, feet touching the floor. The house was quiet, wrapped in that heavy nighttime stillness that made every thought louder. She looked at the wheelchair parked beside her, then at the wall across the room. Just one step, she told herself, not walking, just moving. Her hands pressed into the mattress. Her legs trembled as she shifted her weight forward. Fear rose fast, sharp and familiar, but beneath it was something new. A memory, a whisper of balance. She stood, the world tilted, her breath caught, and before she could think too much, before her courage could dissolve, she moved one foot forward. It landed clumsily. Her knee buckled. She grabbed the wall and slid down, landing hard on the floor. The sound echoed. "Elena," Vittorio called out sharply, already moving. They found Sofia sitting against the wall, her face pale, her hands shaking. "I didn't mean to," she started, panic creeping into her voice. Elena dropped beside her instantly, checking her legs, her arms, her face. "Are you hurt?" Sofia shook her head. Tears spilled over, unstoppable now. "I walked," she whispered. "Just one step." Vittorio stood frozen in the doorway. One step. That night, no one slept. Luca came earlier than usual the next day. He could tell something had changed the moment he saw Sofia's face, tired, yes, but glowing with a fragile kind of pride. "You didn't wait," he said gently. She looked down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." He knelt in front of her. "Don't be, but next time we do it together." From that day on, the work became harder. Standing turned into shifting. Shifting into lifting. Lifting into steps that came with bruises and frustration and tears that Sofia hated herself for crying. Some days she hated Luca too. "I can't," she snapped one afternoon, throwing her hands down as her legs shook uncontrollably. "You said it would get easier." Luca stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I said you would get stronger." "That's not the same thing." She looked at him, breathing hard. "I don't want to be brave anymore." "I know," he replied softly, "but you don't have to be brave forever. Just for today." Elena watched these moments with a heart stretched thin. She was proud of her daughter, terrified for her, and quietly furious at the world for asking so much of a child. She noticed other things too. How Luca never touched Sofia unless he asked. How he spoke to her like she was capable, not fragile. How his presence filled the spaces Vittorio used to dominate without trying to replace him. And Vittorio noticed as well. He noticed how Elena smiled when Luca arrived. How she laughed more easily. How the house felt warmer in ways money had never bought. Jealousy crept in, unwelcome and sharp, not because Luca was a threat, but because he was a mirror. One evening, Vittorio cornered Luca in the garage, attached to the house. "You're getting close to my family," Vittorio said. Luca didn't look up from the straps he was adjusting. "I'm helping your daughter walk." "That's not what I meant." Luca met his eyes then. "Then say what you mean." Vittorio hesitated. That alone felt like defeat. "Be careful," he said finally. Luca nodded. "I always am." But as Vittorio walked away, Luca added quietly, "Careful isn't the same as distant." The words followed Vittorio long after the door closed. Weeks passed. Sofia took more steps. 10, 20. A full lap of the garden with rests in between. Each milestone felt like a victory and a warning all at once, proof that some miraculous was happening, and a reminder that miracles could be taken away. Then one afternoon, everything stopped. Sofia collapsed mid-step, pain flashing across her face like lightning. She cried out, clutching her leg. Alina screamed her name. Luca caught her before she hit the ground. Doctors came. Tests were ordered. Old fears resurfaced, heavy and suffocating. In the sterile white of the hospital room, Sophia lay silent, exhausted, her small hand gripping Alina's finger. The doctor spoke carefully. Too carefully. She's pushed herself, he said. There's inflammation. If she continues like this, he didn't finish the sentence. That night, Vittorio stood alone in the hospital corridor, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. For the first time in his life, there was no one to threaten, no deal to make, only a choice: push forward and risk losing everything, or stop and risk breaking his daughter's heart. And somewhere down the hall, Luca sat with his head in his hands, wondering if believing too hard had finally crossed the line between hope and harm. Days passed like slow storms. Sophia barely spoke. Her small frame lay curled in the hospital bed, sheets tangled around her legs. Alina didn't leave her side. Vittorio didn't either, though he stayed in silence, leaning against the far wall, rigid, watching, unblinking. Luca came when he was allowed, moving quietly through the sterile hospital corridor, with his worn jacket clinging damply to his shoulders from the rain outside. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear, but he didn't flinch. He had seen worse, though never in a room where hope seemed so fragile. Alina caught Luca's eyes the first time he entered. They said what words could not: her exhaustion, her fear, her desperate hope that Luca would know what to do. He knelt beside Sophia's bed, careful not to touch her, just letting his presence anchor her in a way only he could. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, though his hands shook slightly as he adjusted the leather straps he had brought. He didn't need to touch her, his voice alone carried weight. Sophia looked at him, her dark eyes wide, still shimmering with tears. "I can't," she whispered, voice raw. "I thought I could, but I can't." "You're not trying to be perfect," Luca said. "You're trying to be brave. That's enough for today." Vittorio, standing stiffly behind them, clenched his fists. He hated feeling powerless, always in control, and yet here, with his daughter's fragile body lying like a fragile bird, he had no leverage. No words, only a quiet storm in his chest he couldn't tame. Alina finally broke the silence. "Vittorio, she needs someone to tell her it's safe to try again. Not orders, not money, not doctors. She needs belief. From us." Vittorio's jaw twitched. Belief was not a word he used often. Hope, maybe, fear, always. But belief. No, not for himself, not for anyone. He started, stopped, then took a step closer to the bed, standing beside Alina. For the first time, his presence was not about authority. It was about being there. Just being there. Luca watched the shift quietly. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Actions were louder than anything else. Over the next week, progress came in microseconds. Sophia managed to lift herself, just an inch, onto her knees. Pain flashed, but she persisted, spurred not by Luca's words, but by the quiet approval in her parents' eyes. Each tiny movement became a battleground. Every trembling step was a victory, every fall a lesson in patience. One evening, Vittorio found himself sitting on the edge of Sophia's bed, his hand hovering uncertainly above hers. "I'm proud of you," he said, voice low and unfamiliar, almost breaking. Sophia blinked. "Really?" "Yes," he whispered. "You're stronger than I ever realized." She smiled faintly, the first real smile in days, and it hit him like a punch. Stronger than he had been in years. Stronger than anyone he had ever known. Luca arrived just after midnight. The hospital corridors empty except for the distant hum of machines and the occasional footstep of a nurse making rounds. Sophia had requested him, her voice small but firm. "I need Luca tonight." When he knelt beside her bed, she reached for his hand. "I want to try again," she said. "I want to walk." He didn't hesitate. He squeezed her hand gently. "Then we will, together." Vittorio, watching from the doorway, felt something unfamiliar twist deep in his chest. Fear. Yes, but not just fear. Something like gratitude. Something like humility. He had ruled the city, controlled people, demanded loyalty, but he had never understood patience like this, had never seen a strength that wasn't enforced, a bravery that wasn't commanded. The night stretched long. Sophia took small steps, clutching Luca's hands, wobbling, falling, laughing, and crying all at once. Elena's arms hovered nearby, ready to catch her, but slowly she began to step back. Vittorio, surprisingly, stayed, silent, witnessing each victory. Each time Sophia straightened, each breath she drew without despair, each quiet laugh, it belonged not just to her, but to all of them. By the end of the night, Sophia could stand alone for a few precious seconds. Nothing monumental yet, but monumental enough. Her face glowed with triumph. Luca's eyes shone with something close to pride. Elena cried quietly behind her hands, overwhelmed. Vittorio's fists unclenched. For the first time in weeks, his breathing slowed, and he allowed himself to feel, not control, not command, not dominate, but feel. And as they left the hospital, carrying hope like a fragile bird between them, Luca knew the path ahead would be long, exhausting, painful, and miraculous. Vittorio realized that power, money, and fear could not teach what patience and belief could. And Sophia, she realized that she had more strength inside her than she had ever imagined, and that sometimes the people who say nothing, the ones who watch and simply believe, could be the ones who help you walk again. But none of them knew the storm waiting beyond the walls of that house. Storm that would test not just Sophia's legs, but every heart in that fragile family, and threaten to undo the trust and progress they had fought so hard to achieve. And in that silence, the unspoken thought lingered: one wrong move, one moment of fear, and everything could fall apart. Weeks turned into months, but progress came slowly, painfully, and with a rhythm all its own. Each day in the garden was a negotiation, with fear, with gravity, and with Sophia herself. Some mornings she would refuse to leave the wheelchair, shaking her head stubbornly, eyes bright with defiance. Other times she would insist on taking steps, even when her legs screamed in protest. Luca never argued. He never pushed. He only observed, guided, and reminded her that falling wasn't failure, it was part of learning. Elena grew quieter as she watched this transformation. Her relief was mixed with a sharp, almost maternal anxiety that never left her chest. She hovered close to Luca when Sophia trained, though never too close, letting him lead while she offered the occasional comforting word. Vittorio, for his part, hovered more rigidly, still struggling with the unfamiliar role of silent witness rather than commander. He would lean against the marble terrace rails, sipping whiskey that had gone untouched for weeks, watch every movement, every tremor, every breakthrough with attention he could neither name nor release. One afternoon, the breakthrough came in a way that neither Luca nor Sophia could have predicted. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the garden, turning it golden. Luca knelt in front of Sophia, encouraging her as she shifted her weight from one leg to the other, her small hands clutching his firmly. "Lean forward," Luca said softly. "Let the ground remember you." She nodded, trembling, and slowly she did it. Not a step, not a stumble, a motion, a recognition that her body remembered something buried under fear and doubt. Again, Luca encouraged, and then it happened. One foot moved forward, then the other, almost imperceptibly at first, but she was moving. Vittorio appeared almost without sound, stepping onto the garden path, watching the small miracle unfold. Elena gasped quietly, hands pressed to her mouth. Sophia's laughter rang out raw and beautiful, mingling with the birdsong. Her legs shook violently, but she was upright and she was walking. Luca let go of her hands, letting her wobble forward a few steps alone. She caught herself against the fountain, grinned, pure joy spreading across her face. "I did it." Vittorio's jaw loosened, his hands unclenching involuntarily. He had never known pride like this, never understood that strength could rise from patience, not power. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. For a long moment they simply watched her. No instructions, no orders, no whispers. Just the small girl who had been broken, walking. But then, as if the universe wanted to remind them that triumph never comes without tension, Sophia stumbled. Not badly, but enough to send a chill through Elena's chest. "Papa!" Sophia cried instinctively. Vittorio lunged forward, catching her just in time. Her small body pressed against him, trembling, and he felt something snap in his chest. Guilt, regret, fear all converging into a sharp pang that left him breathless. He had bought everything money could buy. Specialists, experts, treatments, yet nothing had worked until this mechanic arrived, patient, quiet, and human. I'm sorry, Vittorio muttered, voice low, almost incomprehensible. Sophia looked up at him, confusion crossing her face. Why are you sorry? He struggled for words. Because I didn't believe in you enough. Because I didn't trust the right people to help. She blinked at him and then smiled faintly. You believe now? Yes, he whispered hoarse. Luca watched silently. His hands brushed the grass as he knelt, giving space, letting the father and daughter find this moment themselves. That night, they celebrated quietly, not with fanfare, not with gifts, not with words that mattered to the world outside, but with simple pride. Vittorio poured a small glass of wine, not for celebration, but as a kind of ritual for acknowledgement. Elena stayed close to Sophia, brushing her hair back, pressing kisses to her damp forehead. Luca lingered in the background, content but aware that this was only the beginning. Over the following days, Sophia began walking longer distances, carefully, deliberately, her laughter becoming a soundtrack that filled the once silent halls. She even insisted on helping Luca adjust the straps each morning, holding them like she understood their purpose beyond their practicality. And yet, the tension in Vittorio's chest remained, because, while his daughter's legs were learning to hold her, he knew that something deeper needed to be addressed. The wall between him and his wife, the shame and fear that had kept him distant, the mistakes he could not undo. Luca could teach her body to trust itself again, but could he teach her father to trust his heart? Late one evening, Luca found himself alone with Vittorio on the terrace. The garden was empty, bathed in moonlight, and the city slept below them, unaware of the small miracles unfolding above. She's walking, Vittorio said quietly, not as a statement, but as if he were testing the words on his own tongue. She is, Luca agreed. You. Vittorio paused, his hands gripping the marble railing. You did this. Not me, not my money, not my doctors. Luca shrugged, trying to appear casual. I didn't do it. She did. Vittorio's eyes met his, sharp and heavy. And yet I owe you more than I can pay. Luca shook his head. No, you owe her, not me. Vittorio remained silent for a long time, staring into the shadows of the garden. Then he exhaled slowly, a sound heavy with relief, regret, and something else, something like understanding. From somewhere inside the house, Sophia's laughter echoed, a reminder that life, fragile and determined, had a way of moving forward whether the powerful liked it or not. And in that echo, both men felt the weight of what had been lost, and the faint, terrifying thrill of what could still be gained. Because walking was one thing, trusting hearts was another, and that journey had only just begun. The days that followed were a delicate rhythm of triumph and setback. Sophia's steps grew steadier, her confidence emerging in flickers, small, radiant bursts that made the house feel alive in a way it hadn't in years. Luca continued to guide her, patient and unwavering, never forcing, never rushing. Each time she stumbled, he offered a hand, a word, or simply his presence. Each time she succeeded, he stepped back, letting her own pride swell before anyone else could claim it. Vittorio, however, struggled silently. He was the kind of man used to commanding, controlling, and bending the world to his will. Watching his daughter learn slowly, painfully, to trust herself again was foreign. He wanted results immediate, undeniable. But Luca had shown him that miracles were not bought, demanded, or forced. They were earned, step by trembling step. Elena noticed the tension. She could see it in the way Vittorio moved. When Luca was around, arms crossed, jaw tight, a flicker of unease in his eyes whenever her husband watched the mechanic adjust straps or guide Sophia's tiny movements. Yet she also saw something new, Vittorio listening, really listening. And that, perhaps, was the first step toward something she had longed for, not just a healed daughter, but a family learning to breathe together again. One late afternoon, as the sun slanted low and painted the garden in shade of amber and shadow, Sophia insisted on attempting something new. I want to walk to the fountain without leaning, she said, determination in her voice. You're ready, Luca said, kneeling beside her, his hands hovering near hers, ready to support but not intrude. Vittorio stepped closer than usual, almost uncomfortably close, as if proximity could shield her from failure. Elena stayed behind Luca, silent but supportive, her hands folded, tension radiating from her. Sofia positioned herself carefully, legs trembling, body bracing against the fear that had haunted her since the accident. Luca whispered instructions, gentle reminders, encouragements, and then slowly she moved forward, one foot, then the other, hands free. Her balance faltered, but not completely. She caught herself, smiled briefly, and continued. Vittorio's chest tightened, and he clenched his fists at his sides, seeing his daughter do something he thought impossible, something no doctor, no specialist, no amount of wealth or power had achieved, stirred in him a mix of pride, awe, and fear. He wanted to speak, to claim credit, to assert his presence, but Luca's quiet confidence held the moment sacred. Sofia reached the fountain and paused, breathless but radiant. She laughed, a sound full of triumph, relief, and pure joy. Elena rushed forward to hug her, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. Vittorio remained still, hands trembling slightly, his eyes softening in a way no one had seen in years. That night, the family sat together in a silence that felt fragile and profound. Vittorio poured a glass of whiskey he didn't drink, staring at it as if the amber liquid could distill his tangled emotions. Luca and Elena sat nearby, not touching but sharing the space comfortably. Sofia leaned against her mother, exhausted but triumphant, her small legs curled beneath her. "You did it," Vittorio finally said, voice low, almost breaking. I didn't think it was possible." Luca shook his head. "She did it. She just needed a little help remembering how." Vittorio's gaze lingered on Sofia, and then, reluctantly, he turned to Luca. "And you didn't just help her walk. You made her believe she could." Luca gave a small, nonchalant shrug. "Belief is the first step. Walking comes next." There was a long pause. Vittorio's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he allowed himself to acknowledge something he had avoided for years: regret. Not just for the years lost, for the specialist visits and the money spent, but for his absence, for his coldness, for the walls he had built around his daughter and wife. And somewhere, deep inside, gratitude began to bloom, messy, complicated, and unfamiliar. The next few weeks were a delicate dance of growth. Sofia began walking longer distances, holding Luca's hands lightly at first, then sometimes without support at all. She laughed, stumbled, fell, and stood again, learning patience, resilience, and trust. Vittorio began to participate, not with force, not with orders, but with presence. He guided when needed, observed, and, for the first time, listened. Elena watched it all with cautious optimism, her heart swelling with relief and hope. But the road to trust was never straight. One evening, Sofia tried to walk alone across the garden and fell hard. Luca caught her immediately, but the fall shook everyone. Vittorio's face went pale, and he rushed to his daughter, emotion threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. "I'm fine," Sofia said bravely, brushing herself off. "Really?" Vittorio took her hand gently, holding it longer than necessary. "I was scared," he admitted quietly, voice almost breaking. I shouldn't have been." Sofia smiled faintly, squeezing his hand. "I know, Papa. But you're here now. That's what matters." That night, Vittorio lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. He thought of the years spent chasing power, money, respect, and how hollow they had felt compared to these small, trembling steps of his daughter. He realized that everything he had controlled outside could never matter as much as what he had almost lost inside: family, love, and trust. Meanwhile, Luca walked home alone in the dark, listening to the city hum quietly. He felt the weight of the transformation, not just in Sofia, but in Vittorio, in Elena, in the fragile connections forming in that house. And he knew this journey was far from over. Because healing legs was one thing, healing hearts, especially those hardened by guilt, control, and fear, was something else entirely. And in the quiet tension of that night, both men understood that the true test was still ahead. Could they walk together, not just Sofia, but all three of them, through the shadows of their past into a future they had yet to imagine? The weeks that followed were a delicate balance between courage and fear. Sofia was walking, yes, but every step was measured, every motion a negotiation with her body and with herself. Luca stayed with her constantly, patient and calm, his hands hovering near but never intrusive, his eyes never leaving her face. Elena's presence was constant too, gentle reminders and quiet encouragement filling the spaces between words. Vittorio, however, remained a careful observer, torn between pride, anxiety, and the heavy weight of guilt he had carried for years. One afternoon, Luca and Sofia were in the garden, practicing the slow, careful rhythm of walking without support. The sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the marble paths. Sofia paused mid-step, brow furrowed, face pale. I can't, she whispered. Her legs trembled violently, threatening to give way. You can, Luca said softly. We'll do it together. Elena appeared beside them almost silently. You don't have to do this alone, Sofia. Vittorio came onto the terrace above them, his hands gripping the railing, jaw tight. He had insisted on watching from a distance, afraid that stepping too close would shatter the fragile progress. But the tension inside him was unbearable. Sofia's gaze met her father's, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something she hadn't before, fear, but also something else, hope. A glimmer that whispered, you're not alone. Taking a deep breath, she lifted herself again. This time, she didn't hold on to Luca's hands at first. She took a single step, then another. The marble was slippery beneath her bare feet, but she didn't falter. Vittorio's breath caught, his fingers unclenched around the railing. He wanted to shout, to run forward, to claim her, but he stayed still. He let her do it. He let her own strength carry her. She reached the fountain, her small body trembling, face glowing with triumph. Luca's eyes shone with pride. Elena's lips trembled with unshed tears, and Vittorio, he felt a storm of emotion he had never experienced before. I didn't know she could, he muttered to himself, voice low. I didn't know I could. Sofia turned to him, her smile radiant. Papa, I did it. Did you see? Vittorio stepped closer, tentative, almost afraid of breaking the moment. Yes, he said, his voice thick. I saw. He swallowed hard. I'm proud of you. Sofia's laughter rang through the garden, pure and victorious. She took another step toward him, hands reaching out. Vittorio knelt instinctively, catching her gently in his arms. Her legs trembled against him, but she stood upright, leaning into him, as though she had been carrying the weight of years without knowing it. Elena came forward, brushing her hair back, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. It's happening, she whispered. She's really walking. The house felt alive for the first time in years. Laughter, cautious and tentative, filled the halls. Vittorio stayed close to Sofia, observing every motion, learning again how to be present without controlling. And Luca watched quietly from the garden path, feeling both joy and an unfamiliar weight of responsibility. Days later, Sofia took her first steps across the living room without assistance. Vittorio had stayed by the wall, a silent witness. Elena held her breath as the girl stumbled, then straightened. Luca had not touched her, only whispered encouragement. Sofia's small voice rang out proud and defiant. I'm doing it. Vittorio's chest tightened. He realized something he hadn't understood before. Control was an illusion. Power outside the home meant nothing compared to the trust, patience, and belief required to nurture something fragile within. That evening, the family sat together in the quiet living room. Sofia rested in Elena's lap, her small legs folded beneath her, exhausted but triumphant. Vittorio poured himself a drink but didn't drink it. He stared at the amber liquid, thinking of the years he had spent chasing power and money, the years he had withheld his presence, and how hollow it all felt compared to the small miracle sitting before him. Luca finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. You've done something incredible, all of you. She walked because you believed she could, not because anyone forced her. Vittorio nodded slowly, still silent. He understood. His daughter had taught him something more important than wealth, more important than influence, more important than fear. Love required patience, and trust required humility. Sofia's eyes met her father's, shining in the dim light. Papa, she whispered, will you walk with me tomorrow? Vittorio's lips pressed into a thin line. He swallowed, nodded, and for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to imagine a life not ruled by fear or power, but by presence and care. The storm of guilt, regret, and lost time still loomed over him, but in Sophia's steps he saw a path forward, a chance to rebuild, not just legs, but hearts. And as the night deepened, Luca quietly slipped out of the room, leaving the father and daughter together. The soft sound of their laughter drifted down the hall, fragile and steady reminder that some victories, though small, were larger than any empire could ever be. Yet beneath that fragile joy lingered a question neither Luca nor Vittorio could answer fully. Could the fragile bonds they were forming survive the world outside these walls, a world that had never been gentle, a world that still demanded obedience, control, and power? The next day would reveal just how strong their courage and their love truly was. The morning sun poured golden light across the garden, casting long, soft shadows over the marble paths. Sophia woke before anyone else, sitting up in bed with a determination that had become familiar over the past months. Her legs felt different now, stronger, confident, though still careful. She swung them over the side of the bed, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "I can do this." Elena arrived moments later, carrying a cup of warm tea. She crouched beside Sophia, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've come so far," she said softly. "Papa will be ready when you are." Sophia smiled faintly, gripping her mother's hand. "I want him to see me walk alone this time." Downstairs, Vittorio poured himself a glass of water. His hand trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from anticipation. He had watched her struggle, fall, and rise countless times. He had spent years in control of everything outside these walls, yet inside he had learned the humbling truth. Some things could not be forced. Courage, trust, love, they grew slowly, painfully, and only with patience. Luca arrived as usual, carrying his worn bag of tools and straps. He set them down quietly, then walked over to Sophia. "Ready?" he asked. His voice was calm, gentle, filled with confidence. Not his own, but hers. Sophia nodded. "I am." They moved to the garden. Vittorio followed, keeping a careful distance. Elena stood at the side, a silent pillar of support. Luca knelt beside Sophia, showing her the motions one last time. "Remember," he said, "today you walk for you. I'm just here if you need me." She took a deep breath, and then she moved. One step, then another. Her legs wobbled slightly, but she didn't fall. Her face lit up, a combination of concentration and joy. And for a moment, the garden was completely silent, except for the sound of her feet against marble. Vittorio felt something shift inside him. He stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on his daughter. He remembered every moment he had missed, every time he had prioritized control over presence, every harsh word, every decision he had made thinking he was protecting her. And now, watching her walk, he felt both regret and pride intertwined so tightly it left him breathless. Sophia reached the fountain without holding on to anyone. She stood tall, her small chest rising and falling with exertion, her smile radiant. Elena rushed forward, tears in her eyes, and pulled her into a hug. "You did it," she whispered. Vittorio hesitated, then closed a distance between them. He knelt slowly, hands shaking, and lifted Sophia's small hands into his. "I'm proud of you," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I always should have believed in you." Sophia looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Really?" "Yes," he said, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I really am." For a long moment, they simply stood together, father and daughter, fragile and whole at the same time. Luca watched from a short distance, a faint smile on his lips. He knew his work had never been about fixing bones or muscles. It had been about healing hearts, building trust, and giving someone the courage to try again. Elena joined them, placing a hand on Vittorio's shoulder. "We've all learned something," she said softly. "Patience, belief, and the power of being present." Vittorio nodded, finally understanding the weight of her words. The empire, the control, the fear, none of it mattered as much as this. Nothing could ever replace seeing his daughter walk for herself, confident, free, and unafraid. Sophia laughed and took a few more steps, spinning around in the garden, her small hands reaching for Luca and her father in turn. Vittorio lifted her into his arms, holding her against his chest as Alina and Luca watched. For the first time in years, the house felt like a home, warm and alive, full of love, trust, and forgiveness. That evening, Vittorio sat alone for a moment, reflecting on the journey. He thought of the power he wielded outside, the deals he had brokered, the fear he had inspired, but none of it compared to the courage, patience, and love that had allowed his daughter to walk again. He realized that some victories, quiet, human, and fragile, were far greater than any empire he had ever ruled. Luca packed his tools quietly, slipping out the door as he always did. Vittorio watched him leave, grateful for the man who had done more than repair a body. He had repaired their family, too. Sofia tugged at her father's hand. "Papa, come on. Let's see how far I can go." Vittorio smiled genuinely, holding her hands. "Lead the way," he said. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to control every step. He simply followed, supporting her, trusting her, and allowing her to grow. They walked together through the garden, laughter ringing out in the warm evening air, a family mending, learning, and finally whole. And in that moment, every fear, every regret, every lost moment dissolved, leaving only love. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more emotional, cinematic tales like Sofia's journey, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss the next story.